Greetings, everyone. Neal here from the Garrett Public Library for this week's Railroader reading. I hope all of you have had a good week. I can recall Sunday nights just a few years ago watching Marlin Perkins in Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom with my family. Both he and Jacques Cousteau gave us all an exciting peek into everything nature spanning our globe. I have selected excerpts from his autobiography, My Wild Kingdom, in the chapter Lapland, The Great Reindeer Drive. The show was filmed in the spring of 1976, and his writings have both the difficulty to film in the environment and tidbits of the Lap culture he had seen. On April 10, 1976, I left JFK Airport in New York on SAS's 5:05 p.m. flight for Copenhagen, bags tagged to Oslo. The Laps probably originated in Central Asia and gradually moved northwestward to their present Lapland. Lapland is not politically a country, but covers part of Norway, Sweden, Finland, and Russia. The Laps are small people, averaging 5 feet in stature, but are strong and muscular. They live above the Arctic Circle, where the birches, pines, and firs are stunted because of the cold weather and short growing season. Of the 30,000 Laps thought to be alive today, 20,000 dwell in Norway. Headquarter village of the group of Laps we would be working with, Kaitokino lies in a valley, a picturesque church on the far side, and the many bright-colored houses against the white snow make it a picture postcard view. There was an air of excitement in the village that day, as the Easter season was nearly upon us. The Laps were in their most colorful costumes. The herd had been moved out a few days before and was feeding at a Lap encampment, where reindeer moss grew. Some animals were still in town for the annual Easter reindeer race, which was attended by a large crowd, and which we filmed. Our guide, Niles Loggi, and I watched near the starting line as several teams, each composed of a reindeer, a sled, and a driver, were given the starting signal. A great shout arose from the crowd as the drivers urged the reindeer forward. Some drivers ran behind to allow greater takeoff speed for the reindeer and then jumped on the sled, trying to get as much speed from the reindeer as possible. Easter afternoon, I left the hotel to join the others at the starting point, the home of one of the Laps on the edge of town. All our gear and other necessities were packed on sleds, covered with reindeer skins and canvas, and securely tied down. Each snowmobile pulled a sled. We had 4 units. The trail led over rolling hill country, frozen lakes, and scattered birch woods. The going was rough. We had left Kaitokino at 7:30 p.m., and at 11 we arrived at a place called Denamaski, a wooden hut with 4 bunks and a stove. We would spend the rest of the night there. After breakfast the next morning, we left at 11 and stopped at the Lap camp. I saw their tents for the first time and was reminded of Indian teepees or wigwams. Years ago, the Laps used reindeer skins sewn together, but blankets are lighter and easier to pack. We were invited into Neal's home to meet the Loggi family. Neal's father, mother, and sister sat around an open fire on reindeer skins and blankets and had coffee and dried reindeer meat, which was toasted in the fire on the end of a stick. We took some pictures inside with these laughing and vivacious people. Soon we were on our way, for we had a long distance to cover to reach the next government hut. After a time it began to snow and weather deteriorated. All at once we were in a whiteout. Following Niels at 30 to 40 feet, I suddenly could not see him. He and his snowmobile and sled had disappeared. I followed his tracks, and he reappeared, but not for long. We were traveling more slowly. Then, because we could see nothing in front of us or around us, we had to stop. We sat in the driving snow for an hour before the whiteout lifted and we could proceed. The wind was picking up, and we were grateful when, just ahead, we saw our cabin. The snowmobiles and sleds we parked in the lee of the cabin and moved what we needed inside. Clearly, a blizzard was building, and we would be here for a day or two until the storm blew itself out. The Laps were scheduled to break camp the next day and move on north. The blizzard increased in the night, however, and blew all the next day. Warren Garst had with him a pocket wind gauge. During the afternoon, when the wind was screaming, he bundled up, went outside, and exposed the gauge to the wind. The indicator went to the top with such force it broke the gauge. The top mark on the gauge was 60 miles per hour. The gale almost blew us over when we had to go outside. At the end of the third day, the storm abated. The Laps said this was the worst storm in 10 years. We spent a whole day in their camp filming their activities, including lassoing the calves and notching their ears with each owner's brand. Each owner of reindeer has his own distinctive ear notch as a brand, so he can always recognize his own animals. All the brands are registered with the government. Each person notching calves saves one piece of cutout skin from each calf and strings them together to form a record of how many calves have been added to his herd. Dogs help in the roundup by driving the reindeer past the lassoers, who await a chance for a good throw. Later in the day, we filmed the breaking up of camp, harnessing the draft reindeer to the sleds, forming a column, and moving out toward the new camp. The dogs helped to control the loose herd and keep the deer in their places during the march. As reindeer strayed away from the main group, the outriders on skis and the dogs would turn them until they were back with the herd. It was most interesting to me to see how gentle and careful the Laps were with the deer. When putting an animal into the shafts of a sled, one man raised the shafts high, while another moved the deer backward or sideways, with a gentle guiding motion of hand or halter. No force or rough handling was used. Some 40 sleds were in the march, along with 3,000 reindeer and a number of people walking. Each camp was on a hill marked with a cairn of rocks, some on top of the pile painted yellow. These were places where reindeer moss grew, and the animals could have the food they required. The camps were about 6 miles apart. At another campsite on a hilltop, there was no wooden hut, so a family of Laps pitched a tent for us. The outside of the tent was weighted down with heavy stones as a high wind was blowing and snow was falling. At 5 in the morning, as I crawled out of my mummy bag, still clad in 2 sets of long johns and wool socks, I found my other clothes covered with snow that had blown in during the night. When we were ready to travel, the snow increased as we approached the column of sleds and reindeer. Then it turned into a whiteout and we had to stop. After a long time, the air cleared enough so that we saw the herd start up the broadside of a mountain. We followed in the high wind and blowing snow. Before long, we were all stuck in deep snow on a considerable slope. There were times when I thought we wouldn't make it without additional help, but I underestimated Neal's ingenuity. With the aid of ropes and with 1 or 2 machines in tandem, he finally got us all to the summit. Ahead of us was level or downhill travel. After a brief rest, we were ready to push on. The importance of traveling close together was proved on the downhill trail. 3 units jackknifed and slid off the trail to the left. It took all of us to get them back on the trail and moving forward. Eventually tired, cold, and wondering what would happen next, we arrived at the Kildale Hydroelectric Station, our first destination on this long and exhausting day. I'll stop there, but their final destination is the reindeer swimming across sections of the North Sea to islands for summer grazing. Such a wondrous but treacherous Nordic tradition. Another staff member will be back next week for a great read. So I shall say so long for now, until the next time we virtually meet.